Welcome to the Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Lauren Lane. For over 50 years, the LSI team has been dedicated to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. This week, we're excited to be meeting with Besa, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Military Family Association. We're going to discuss the impactful experiences that helped shape her life and career, the mission and vision of the National Military Family Association, and what Besa envisions the future to look like. Let's jump in.
Give us some background on your early childhood, your family history, and some of the things that you did before starting your calling, maybe in this field of military families.
Sure. Well, I grew up, born and raised in Houston, Texas. So I'm very much a Texan, but my dad is an immigrant from Kosovo. He immigrated to the US in the 70s, met my mom while she was doing a study abroad through her college. And so growing up in an immigrant family with really strong ties to my dad's side of the family in Kosovo, I would say is just the overarching theme of my childhood. I used to spend all of my summers in Kosovo with my dad's side of the family. So they'd drop us off at the end of school, pick us up right before school started. And it was a remote village in Kosovo. We didn't have a phone, so I wouldn't talk to any of my family here for a really long time. And I, was really immersed in my family and the culture there. And it was a really ideal time in my life. Like, I just had so much fun. It was very free. We would just run around the village, had so many cousins. And what I didn't really understand at the time that became a lot more evident the older I got is that there was this looming war that was going to be happening at some point. That part of the world has always been really volatile, the Balkans, and my family's Albanian. And during the summers, I didn't really understand that a lot of the things that were happening were really a lead up to that. So we'd be on a bus and these soldiers would come on the bus and start demanding different forms of ID or trying to ask us a lot of questions. And I didn't really understand that that wasn't just part of life over there. It was part of something scarier that was looming. And the older I got, the more things happened. I remember being around age, I think I was 14, and I was there with all of my younger cousins. And these Serb militants came and just started ransacking our house. And it was truckloads full of them, pointing guns at us and just ripping apart the house. And that was the first time that I remember thinking, this is more than just life. There's something really scary happening here. And after that summer, things started really building up, and I didn't go back to Kosovo for a couple of summers. And as things became more volatile and the war started, my family was in a really bad situation. Their house was burned down. I have family members who died. I have family members who suffered major injuries. But it really all came to a head when my family was dispersed throughout the region, and they were in camps. They were just in these refugee camps all around the region. So in Albania, in Kosovo, on the border, in just different parts of that area. And my dad actually went to a news organization at the time and said, I really need to find my mom. I really need to find my family. And they followed him over there, digging through these refugee camps, opening tents and looking in and looking for my family. And so I remember that and it was a really emotional time for me. And I was also in college at the time and working in a newsroom and hearing how they were talking about it. I was a journalism major at University of Texas. And I remember my TV station interviewing me, like, tell me how things are going with your family. Tell me, did you find your grandmother? And so going through all of that, and then the United States deciding to go in and take military action. This was my first introduction to the US military. I actually didn't know much about them. You know, my dad, as an immigrant, always said, we love this country. The United States is a beacon of hope. That was the phrase he would always use. And then when we watched the news and we watched that the United States was getting involved, my dad just kept saying, you see, Besa, this is a beacon of hope. You know, he would say it in his thick accent. And I really understood for the first time what he meant by that. And so you'll remember that was a pretty short military action for the United States. However, it meant so much to my family and to me personally. And so for the next several years, I just had this deep sense of gratitude. And after I started my journalism career, I worked at a TV station, a couple of them in Texas. And I said, I want to go and see what's going on with our local troops. So I was able to travel to Kosovo a year after the war and interview some of our Texas troops that were stationed at Camp Bondsteel and just talk to them about that experience and see what life was like there a year after the war. And so that was my first time really hearing anyone talk about their family. These service members that were over there would mention what they were going through, how they were serving that region. And then they would also talk to me about their families at home. And it honestly had never dawned on me until that moment that they had families. I know that's a really crazy thing to say, but you watch so many movies and you're just like, they don't show what's happening back at home. They just show our service members going and doing this important duty. They show veterans, but the family is often left out of that. And it just dawned on me for the first time that that's such an important part of the equation. And so as I moved on in my journalism life, it took me to Jacksonville, North Carolina. And I was the bureau chief there at the ABC affiliate for the eastern part of the state. And I was just starting to dig in to military life. What is it like here in Jacksonville, where it's about 90% military? If you're not living on Camp Lejeune, you're working there, your family is there. So it was such a huge part of the community. And I was getting to know them. And I also got to know this handsome young guy named Dave, who's now my husband. And I'll tell you that when I moved to Jacksonville, I got one piece of advice. I said, what is this place like? What can I expect? And they said, it's a bunch of jarheads and don't marry any of them. That was all I heard. It was like, whatever you do, just don't marry them. And of course, I did. I didn't listen to any of that. And so I ended up getting married to my husband while I was working at that TV station. And also during that time, the war in Iraq started. And I was right there in the middle of it. And to be honest, this was when I was even first finding out the difference between Marines and the Navy and the Army. But I was right there in the middle of it. And every day I was either on the shores for a deployment. I was knocking on someone's door who had just lost a loved one. This was the very beginning, and the Marines were in first, you'll remember. Yep. And every day I was telling the stories of these families, and they just had such an impact on me. Well, my husband, he ended up having to medically retire from the military. He had a spinal injury, a spinal surgery, and he ended up leaving the military. And then I, in turn, made the choice for our family, which was growing. We had our first baby, and we knew we were going to be having more kids. And we had this talk about, what are we doing for our family? And I decided to leave TV and focus more on family. So we moved to DC because he's from here. And he did this thing that a lot of our military do that I did not know was a thing at the time. And that is struggling through transition. I mean, I don't know how many jobs he had in those 2 years. It was everything from selling credit card machines to small businesses in rural North Carolina, to working for his dad, thinking he was going to take over the family business, to working for a contractor. It was just everything. And I'll tell you, before I became involved here at National Military Family Association, I really never identified those issues that we were having as a family with military related issues. I just thought we're a family who's going through some things as families do. I didn't really understand that part of it. So in the meantime, I knew that I wanted to work and I didn't want to take too long before doing that, but I was looking for a family friendly job and I ended up working in tech. I did PR and marketing for this company called Capterra that helps businesses find software. It was flexible. It was, a modern business is what I would call it. Like they were Google-esque, you know, anything you wanted to eat or drink was in the kitchen. We had unlimited vacation, do whatever it is that you need to do, just get the job done, which is a great way for me to start working in a new field. And I really liked it. But after 5 years, they send you on a sabbatical. That's another perk of being in, tech versus nonprofit. So they said, hey, take some time off, come back. You're going to feel more motivated. You're going to feel more energized. So I did, and I decided that I wanted to go to Kosovo with my family. So I took my kids, my husband, we went and spent several weeks there. My parents went. It was just this family time in Kosovo. And I came back, and instead of feeling all of those things, motivated, excited, ready to get back to software, I came back and decided that it wasn't for me. I really wanted to do something that would feed my soul. And I didn't know at that time what exactly that was going to be. But, I started looking around and this job popped up on LinkedIn to be a communications director at National Military Family Association. And I immediately was like, yep, that's it. I'm not applying for any other jobs. This is the job I want. This is the job I'm getting. And I did. And it was all really quick. I mean, I came back from the sabbatical and within a month, I was putting in my resignation and coming to National Military Family Association. I had never been more excited about a job and a pay cut and a smaller office and a budget. Like I had no idea that would make me so excited, but it did. And that was the beginning, my early days at National Military Family Association.
That is an amazing story and a lot to unpack. But let me ask you a couple of things. You had told me this history that you had as a child to Kosovo and your family being refugees into the U.S. And what happened with your family that was left in Kosovo?
I'm so glad you asked me that because they are doing really well right now. They've rebuilt our family home. In fact, they've rebuilt several family homes on the land where we once had one. And my parents bought a place over there too. So they're splitting their time now between Texas and Kosovo. And none of this was possible before. I mean, this was another thing I didn't understand at the time is that people weren't really investing because they knew it wouldn't be theirs with this upcoming conflict that was bound to happen. And so now I have a lot of family that's still there. I have a lot of family who've moved to just different countries around the world, especially in Europe, some in the United States as well. But my family is doing great. I actually went there last year to visit, and I got invited by the Prime Minister of Kosovo to his office because he wanted to thank military families for their sacrifices on behalf of the country.
Wow.
And that's such a full circle moment for me that it was indescribable. It was amazing to be on all of those sides of this.
Was this sabbatical the first time you had been back since the war?
No, it wasn't. I had made some shorter trips, but I hadn't really gone with my whole family where I was really able to disconnect from work. So taking those short trips was good. But I don't know about you, but when I go on vacation and if I say to myself, I'm not going to check my email, those first days, it hurts. Like it hurts your chest to not check your email because you don't know what's going on in there. So I think you need a certain amount of time to truly disconnect and really think about what's important to you. And it was the first time forever, that I'd really been able to start thinking about what's important to me, what's meaningful, where is this taking me? Am I on that path that I want to be on with my family?
And I'm curious, what happened to your grandparents during the war? You said that their home was destroyed and that they were in these camps. And I mean, did they survive?
Some did and some didn't. My grandmother survived and passed later. But the way that my dad found them was in a refugee camp in Albania. And he literally went camp to camp to camp. And there's a video, several, because it was an ABC News series in Houston, but they were sneaking into camps on bread trucks because you couldn't get in or out, and then literally just going from camp to camp to camp. And then the other thing that was happening at that time is there would be all of this video that was coming through on the news, and we would record it, and then we would slow motion watch it. And my dad would just be like, "Oh, is that her?" And, like zooming in and trying to figure out if that was his mom, if that was his brother. He comes from a really big family. So 10 siblings and lots of, like I mentioned, lots of cousins. And so it was a while before they were able to go home. And then for years after that, some of the things I saw when I would go back is the landmines that were everywhere. So my family home, actually, they turned it into a mine sweeping headquarters. And so there were troops from different countries stationed there, and their main job was clearing the landmines. And that was there for years, and it's not anymore. It's now just, my uncle's house, but it took a while.
That is such an incredible story. Just something that happened a few weeks ago. I was at a dinner and there was a conversation about what's happening in Eastern Europe today. And somebody said, there has not been a conflict in Eastern Europe really since World War II. I said, whoa, you've forgotten what happened in the Baltics, not that long ago. And I think this is such an important part of European history that, I think it has in some ways been forgotten and overshadowed by other things, that not the least of which the Cold War at the time, and and other things that have happened in Eastern Europe, but significant. And thank you so much for sharing that story, which I thought was fascinating.
One thing I want to mention, and the reason why I think that maybe people don't remember it, as I mentioned, the conflict from a U.S. perspective was pretty quick as far as in and out.
Right.
But there wasn't social media like there is now. So much of what we know about what's happening in Ukraine is just readily available.
Yes.
Anytime you want to get on your phone or your TV or anywhere. But I remember working in a newsroom in college and saying to my, editors, just saying, "Hey, this thing's going on, and do we want to talk about it? And I have family there, and I could give this perspective." And it was kind of like me pitching this thing that seemed so abstract and so just like out of the realm of our daily life, that unless you were watching the nightly news, you probably didn't know about it. And that's just not how things are anymore.
That's a great point. And you're right. It was horrible. It was horrific. And we had a lot of members of the LSI alumni that served in the conflict and have told me the stories that it's horrendous. It was terrible. So I thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you mentioned to me that you speak Albanian. Your father taught you Albanian, and you'd go back and speak Albanian in the country. Is that correct?
Yep. And my mom is born and raised in the US. And so she also speaks Albanian, but it was kind of hard. Anyone who's had, one parent who's an immigrant and one isn't, and to speak Albanian in the home. So we just had a few phrases that we would say. But then what I really learned was through those summers, it was just being dropped off there and having no other choice but to speak. If you go there now, everyone speaks English. But when I used to go there, that definitely was not the case.
Do you speak Serbian as well?
I do not. I do understand some, and especially the terms that I would hear most often, which aren't, the best ones. I definitely know some of those terms, but no, I do not speak Serbian.
So this path that you've been on, what was it that made you initially want to pursue a career in journalism? And then, it's obvious, I think, okay, you were a military spouse. You understood this better than anybody. But what led you down that path that you wanted to pursue this career in journalism?
It was my dad. We used to watch the news all the time, and he was always getting me really engaged in conversations about what was happening. We'd watch the presidential debates together, even when I was a really little girl, and he would say, what do you think about that? Or, what's happening with this? And I remember even before I could barely walk, and he would take me to the polls with him to vote. And he would always try to explain to me the big picture, like we're doing this because of this, and here's the impact, and here's why it's important. And so I think that wanting to be a person to connect those dots for others, because you're going through life so much and you're not really slowing down to think about what might be important in that moment. And I think journalism, if done well, is that it's connecting those dots, it's telling those stories, and especially stories from people who may not always be heard.
Absolutely. So your time as a military spouse, I mean, is there anything, looking back at that period of your life, was there anything that really triggered this? I'm going to go fight for our military families. And was it? Was it your own challenges tied to being a military spouse, being married to a member? What really was that trigger that put you in this new trajectory?
So talking to military families every day, I would be reporting on all the different things that they were going through. But there are two people in particular that have left a mark on me, and they were people that I reported on and I'm still in touch with to this day. And the first one is a military spouse named Janina Bitts. Her husband, Sergeant Michael Bitts, was one of the first Marines killed in Iraq. And that day, as part of my job I went to her house. She lived in a trailer in rural North Carolina with her 4 kids. And I got there and I knocked on the door and I asked her if she wanted to talk about Michael. She didn't. I gave her my card. I said, whenever you want to, just reach out to me. And as I was leaving, a lot of other media showed up. And one of them that was from a national network, she didn't want to talk to them. And this photographer climbed up the side of her trailer with his camera and took a picture of her giving her kids a bath on the day that she found out that her husband was killed. And this was before they gave a 24-hour grace period for the family before notifying the media. That didn't exist before. So she was facing all of this on the absolute worst day of her entire life. And she fought for that. She fought for that for other military spouses, that they would have a day, a moment, a time to just be able to digest what's just happened to them. And so I stayed in touch with her over the years, and she, did several interviews with me, and also we're now friends because it's been a long time since then. But just seeing her fight for that, not for her, because that wasn't going to happen to her again, but for others around her. And then there was another man, and his name was Jeremy Ensminger. And he used to come to my bureau all the time. And it was just this little bureau in Jacksonville. And he would knock and he would say, I need to tell you about my daughter. The military killed my daughter, he kept saying. And when you're in TV or in journalism in general, you're thinking to yourself, we're a place where everyone goes and they want to tell us a story. And sometimes it's real and sometimes it isn't. You really have to sift through it. But as I got to know him, what he was talking about was the water contamination on Camp Lejeune. And you've probably heard of it now with the dry cleaning chemicals seeping into the water. Well, his young daughter died of cancer due to that water contamination. And he was fighting for her. I mean, she had already passed. He was at my door weekly. He was fighting at Congress. I followed him up to DC when he testified. He really was a strong voice for his daughter and for all military families who went through that. And those two people, I always think of them. And I recently had another full circle moment, which I guess is maybe about to be the theme here, but I had talked to him over the years because I'd give an interview maybe about something having to do with the water contamination, and he'd find me and he'd call my home phone, which yes, we still have one. And he'd call and he'd be like, I heard you and you forgot this part, and he would always say, don't forget to tell them this and don't forget to tell them that. And he was just on me and always has been, for decades now. And a couple of years ago, when the PACT Act was passed, I was invited to the White House with a lot of the organizations that had worked toward that. And I'm just sitting there while they're doing the signing. And right on stage, I see Jeremy Ensminger. And we locked eyes and both of us just welled up with tears, and I was mouthing to him, like, you did it, And he said, in a way only Jeremy would say, he was like, if they had killed your daughter, you would have done it too. And people like him, people like Janina, these were the things that made me know that there were changes to be made and that it was individuals who could really make them. And that is such a core theme at National Military Family Association. We always talk about be your own best advocate. We talk about policy taking 7 to 10 years to happen. But there are things that you can do now, and there are things that you can do that might not ever help you or your family, but will help so many others.
So you decide you're going to go in a completely different direction. Was that an easy decision? Was it a challenge?
It was, because this is one of those things where people are always asking you your 5 and your 10-year plan, and I don't do them. I saw something on the internet recently about, I have a Snickers in the freezer later, and that's how far I plan. But, and I'm not going to say I'm like that, but I will say that I have found that when you do good work and you show your heart and you show your intention, opportunities will present themselves, and it's upon you to seize upon them. I know you're still laughing about my Snickers, but you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
We can't always plan for the 10-year, but we can plan for our snack later. But yeah, it wasn't hard because I came back and I was so determined that I didn't want to do this type of work anymore. I wanted to do that type of work. And even when I went into the interview, they had me sitting there for a while because our former executive director, Joyce Razor, who's just the queen of all things, she's advocate extraordinaire. She was talking to a national news organization, and she was just telling them everything that was wrong and everything that needed to be done to fix it. And I was just listening from the other room while I was waiting for the interview. And I just wanted to be like, yes, yes, in the background. So by the time she came in, I was so excited. I was like, when can I start? What do I do? And of course, she made me do all of these assignments and made it really hard on me. But I immediately knew that that's where I wanted to work. And I never actually thought about being in the position I'm in now. I never thought about it. I was like, I want to tell these stories. There's so many important stories to tell. I didn't know about National Military Family Association, and I should have, and others should have too. So this is my opportunity to really spread the word about this message and all the support that's available. And so over the years, I really dug into that communications role for about the first 5 years, which was great. I was still having kids. I have 3 now. I was, really focused on the behind the scenes work. I was writing the words that you would see on the website. I was helping to write some of, the talking points. And strategy and all of those things that are important for communicating. But then different opportunities would present themselves. And it was, hey, we don't have a program director. Do you want to do this, or could you at least fill in for a while? And I would say, absolutely. And I'd jump in and I'd learn it. And it was, hey, we have a development opening. Have you ever thought about doing development? And I said, no, but I love a challenge. I go, yes, let's do it. And so as I did these things, some of them would be temporary, some of them became permanent, but it was always kind of understanding along the way how all of the parts and pieces work together. And I think that through that, when the opportunity came, I felt really prepared. I just was like, I know how all of these things link, and I want to be the person to link them. And I have this vision for how it should be. So I was absolutely thrilled. I remember when the board chair called me, and it was really late on a Sunday night, like 11:30 or something. And she said, so we voted. And I said, now? And she said, yeah. And we wanted to offer you this position. And I said, was it unanimous? And she was like, yeah. And I said, okay, good. Because I need to make sure I have your full support, because I'm really excited to do all of these great things. And she said, well, you do. And it's been a great, 2+ years so far.
I sometimes meet people that I can just tell that they have a calling, and this to me is your calling. And the work that you've been doing over the last decade around the military family, and really in parallel with some of the things that LSI has done over the last 20 years, is just remarkable. And there is this path that I think you found leading this organization. It is just, it's remarkable. And what you've done, starting leading the communications and working all of the positions in the organization to now your role as CEO, is such a great story in of itself that that doesn't happen very often. And I hope you recognize how special this is, and that sort of this position found you, it sounds like.
It feels like the position found me. And I am so excited to hear about companies like yours who are doing things that sound like maybe a nonprofit would be doing them, because they truly are for the betterment of communities. And so when you invited me here, I was just so thrilled, because I know that, you're doing good too. And we can't do it alone. I sound so cheesy when I say it, but I'm going to keep saying it. We always say, together we're stronger. That's our tagline. And I fully believe it, because there's no way that we can do it alone.
So tell me the strategy and your vision for the National Military Family Association. And I'm so impressed with your priorities as well. Can you walk through what the organization is focused on and your vision for the organization long term?
Absolutely. We started as an advocacy organization, 1969, when military widows did not have benefits. We were a group of women sitting around a kitchen table who decided to do something about it. I mentioned, Janina and how she did something about it. That's what this group of women did. So they marched to Capitol Hill, and that was the start of the Survivor Benefit Plan. For decades, it was advocacy in that way. See a problem, go do something about it. But it takes a while, as I mentioned, 7 to 10 years to move the policy needle. And so at the beginning of the Iraq War, while I was off reporting and talking to military families and getting my own footing as a military spouse, the National Military Family Association saw some really big emerging needs. And one of them was with military kids who were dealing with deployments and separations, and started up Operation Purple programming, which is camps and retreats for kids and for families, getting them away from the stresses of military life. And then also our military spouse scholarship program. Military spouse employment is one of those issues. I mean, this is what you and I have been talking about. The needle has not moved in over a decade. The number is, I mean, you can ask, there's several variations of the number, but more than 20% is the lowest that I've heard, more than 20%. And so, we have our number, DoD has their number, but it's all extremely high compared to the national average. So our military spouse scholarship program provides not just your standard bachelor's degree scholarship, but also for licensures, for certifications, whether it's because you're an entrepreneur and you need funding for your business. We've made it very flexible to meet the flexibility that military spouses need. And the other area that we've gotten into is military teens as a population. So we do work with spouses, we do work with kids, but teens in particular. And we have a program called Bloom that was started by and for military teens that's now part of our NMFA family, that's really focused on military teens and connection, and also just setting them up for success in their future as well. And as you talk about vision, when I look at military families, there's so many issues you can focus on. And, when NMFA started, we were the one and only military family organization, and a lot of other ones have popped up. And I'm so thankful for them because there's so much to do and we all play our role. But when I look at the needs, the critical areas are physical and mental well-being, which you can call one or two things. Those are huge, huge issues for military families. But the third one that I even see as overarching in all of those areas is military family financial security. Military families are having a very hard time right now, in particular in certain parts of the country. And we know this through everything from surveys that DoD has put out that talk about food insecurity, what our military teens and program applicants are telling us. And it's because of a lot of different things, but key on that list is military spouse employment. You're just not set up for success when you're moving every 2 to 3 years.
I think this is something that we've tried to evangelize for a number of years now. And I told you this story that the former governor of Virginia, Governor Terry McAuliffe, I really credit him and his team for recognizing the amount of military families stationed in Virginia, one of the military states in the U.S., and that there were so many of these military spouses that needed to work and were not working. I didn't understand it. And to his credit, he said, we want you and your team to go into these installations and see this firsthand. And I think there is this perception, I know that I had that, even with all of the former veterans and even military spouses that we've employed over the last 50 years, it's changed. It has changed significantly over the last even 20 years. Being a military spouse is not what it used to be. And, I had this perception, I think, like a lot of people, well, these families, they have housing on the base and they've got the commissary, the BX, and like all of these benefits as being a part of the military. And it is what was just so shocking to me is when my team came back and said, we were working a TANF initiative at the time, working with the Department of Health and Human Services, and also a joint program with the Department of Labor for these TANF eligible individuals. To be TANF eligible, you have to be 200% below the poverty level with at least one child in the home. My team said, the majority of these families are TANF eligible, and how could that be? Mm-hmm. I think that what you're doing to evangelize the financial security of these families, while there's this idea, well, we want to solve the healthcare, the education, the mental illness and stress challenges. So much of that ties back to income, and that you want to solve the root cause of a lot of these challenges. It is income, and there are very few, even the officers, the flag officers, that even their families need two incomes to survive in today's world. And you and I have talked about this challenge inside of DoD, even where we see some of the leadership who have taken this position. We did it. 30 years ago, we had to go through basic training, and we knew this was the life we've chosen, that for the next 30 years, we're going to move every 2 years, and it's going to be a sacrifice. And this was the life we've chosen. It's a different time, and these families that are trying to survive at a TANF wage it's a problem. And I think also the recognition that this is a national security issue around recruiting and retaining these service members. That's not going to happen if, every night the member's coming home and listening to his or her spouse saying, we can't survive doing this. We can't afford for you to do that, go off and serve. And what you're doing, and I think in parallel with some of our initiatives around income and the military family, is critical for the future of our military.
Fully agree with you. And, we hear a lot of different things, whether it's, oh, we're only talking about the very lower enlisted families. It's not just that. I can tell you that in our Operation Purple program in California this summer, out of our applicants, more than 2/3 fell below the HUD low income line. And these are families with children who are 7 to 16. So these aren't brand new enlisted families. These are people who've been in the military long enough to have kids that age. So it really is everyone, and especially in certain areas. And California is one of them.
If you're stationed in Southern California, if you're a Navy family stationed in San Diego, if you're an Air Force family stationed in LA, the cost of living is so overwhelming. I mean, the stress that puts on a family where they PCS into this new role and are trying to figure this out, it's unbelievable. And I mean, you mentioned some of the families you interfaced with in North Carolina. We saw that firsthand as well. You go into Fort Bragg, and the coveted jobs at Fort Bragg are retail and hospitality. I mean, you're working at a Starbucks is a coveted job, and outside the base. And we see so many of these amazing, capable military spouses that have so much to offer and need two incomes, that it is an unrecognized source of labor in our country. And one of the things that our team has started really trying to educate both DoD and the Fed Civ organizations is that, as you said, the military spouse unemployment has not moved in 20 years, despite a lot of effort, a lot of investment into this program. We believe that the military spouse demographic is the largest disenfranchised and unemployed, underemployed demographic in the U.S. today, and we're getting some traction there. We've seen that in commerce and labor, obviously in the Department of Defense Family Office, where when we show the numbers of families living at poverty and the unemployment or underemployment of these military spouses who are living at a TANF level of income, we're finally seeing these organizations recognizing that this is an incredible opportunity to bring these families into positions and careers long term that will allow them to take care of their families and solve a lot of the challenges that exist today for military families.
Yeah, and I think too, even the families who are doing okay financially are having to make choices that aren't always what's best for their family overall, but might just make it okay financially. When I even think about here in the DC area, people are choosing to live an hour and a half away because it's where they can afford. And then they're missing that 3 hours of time with their family that they can't get. And they're coming home exhausted. And then let's go do it again. So it's those types of choices. We know a lot of families too are doing what we call geo batching, meaning the service member moves and the family stays put.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, it's because that military spouse has solid employment and has built a support system that they'll have to rebuild if they move.
It's almost like a deployment in a lot of ways. It's horrific. Well, I'm excited that you and I finally connected and that our organizations have talked about collaborating on the work that we've been doing in parallel. And I just, like I said, I'm so impressed with what you've done with the organization in the last 10 years and the future. I think it is an opportunity now where we can bridge some of the policy and the appropriations too that have not been deployed effectively to have that long-term impact on these families. And what we're about, what you're about is results, and that I want to see these military spouses at a unemployment or underemployment level commensurate with the rest of the country, which we don't have today. And seeing the impact that you've had on this challenge has been impressive, and I think will be synergistic to the work that LSI is doing as well.
Yeah, I really look forward to working with you on this. I think that you're right. We have the right partnerships in place and we're starting to build that momentum. But I mean, there's a clear metric. We're going to know when we're starting to move the needle.
There's plenty of funding. There's plenty. I mean, the policy work and the foundation has been laid. It's time to focus on high wage placement for these individuals, and that it's it is a commitment. It's even transitioning out of the military for the family. That transition is critical, not just for the member, but for the spouse and family as well.
It is. And that's why, too, when we talk to people at VA or some of the veterans organizations, the veteran focused Congress people as well, and they ask, are we focused on veterans? Every single thing we do is focused on veterans because everything that happens in your active duty life is what's going to impact your veteran life. So really, we're getting upstream of that issue. And I'm really excited to work with you more on it.
I am as well. Besa, since we were together a few weeks ago, I've had a lot of interest in both government and private foundations and even individuals that want to know more about how can they support this? How can they provide financial support? How can they engage the association at the installations? How's the best way to connect with you and the organization?
I mean, when it comes to your contacts that you think should be talking to me, please just give them my phone number, my email. I want to talk to them anytime, day or night. And of course, if it's someone who just wants to learn more, I'd love for them to check out militaryfamily.org for the most updated information on our website, and also all of our social media channels where we are constantly putting out information on critical issues and also the different types of support that we're providing.
In just a few weeks, we have maybe one of the most influential groups of individuals coming to Washington, D.C., and I've already said I want either them to come to you or you to come to them while they're in D.C., and we'll make that happen, because I think that there's an opportunity to leverage some of the financial and influence of this group. So that's one of the things that's near term.
Do you know when?
It's the last week in October.
Okay, perfect. Because the week before that, I am in San Antonio. Well, I'm there the second half of that week. I don't want to miss it. It sounds like a great opportunity.
Yes, I think it'll be great. What do you do when you're not fighting for military families? What do you do for fun? And you said you had 3 kids. That's obviously probably consumes a lot of your time. But what is it that you're doing when you're not in the office?
Well, I live on Capitol Hill, and we have a really tight-knit community and neighborhood. It almost feels like a small town in the midst of a big city. But you can normally find me on a soccer field. It might be my oldest daughter's soccer field, youngest son, middle daughter, but even just this past weekend, I was in North Carolina, and we are all the way a soccer family, whether it's them playing or us watching, the local DC United and Washington Spirit teams. So lots of that in our lives right now.
It's fantastic. I said thank you so much for this time and for the work that you're doing. And I am really excited to be collaborating with you on these issues that I'm so passionate about, and you are as well. So
thanks so much, Sean. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited about it too.
As well. Take care. Thank you.